The Flesh Prison is a chaotic fight, and arguably can cause more trouble for the player than the fight that precedes it. Today, however, we're going to take on the whack-ass Flesh Prison by covering its various attacks, how to handle them amidst the chaos, and some general strategies for the fight. Without further ado... wait, hold on just a second. Let's take a look at how to skip the spine staircase first. This is actually pretty simple, but it'll take some practice before you really get it. First, you'll want to grab the torch, then turn about 45 degrees to the right, then walk up to the edge of the platform here. Next, you'll want to dash jump and hold W for just a split moment, no longer, no less. After this, don't touch the movement keys. While doing this, look down, and I like to turn myself to the right very slightly here still. As you fall, you'll quickly come to see a piece of spine just to the right. As soon as you see this, you'll want to hold right on your movement keys, and you should come right up to the door at the bottom. If you have the whiplash, you can actually use the torch to try to find the way as well. Flesh Prison itself has 100 HP with a 50% damage resistance to the electric rail cannon. It has 5 unique abilities, 2 of which we covered in the previous video, the summon ability and the healing ability. The other 3 are different attacks it can use in tandem with each other, making for a very chaotic battlefield. The other 3 attacks are easy to see coming to a very generous tell, a specific colored shockwave that is emitted from FP. These attacks are the Hellseeker Cyclone, the Black Hole, and the Pillars of Divine Light. While it might be easy to see what attack is coming next, avoiding them is another matter in and of itself. It's important to note that FP will not use the same move twice in a row. So let's take a look at each one. The Hellseeker Cyclone begins as FP comes to a stop and starts to spin in the opposite direction, slowly increasing speed as it spits out blue Hellseeker orbs, exactly like the ones the Mind Flayer summons. These orbs will attempt to track the player down, as the name implies, and will do 30 damage each. These orbs can be parried and inflict a decent amount of damage against FP and can also heal you, the player. If you can manage to deflect the orbs with an explosion, you can sometimes take out huge chunks of FP's health or even get an insta-kill. However, this is very unreliable to get, and as of right now, there is no consistent method of getting an insta-kill. If some of the malicious summons are alive, the explosions they create can actually cause deflections as well. One way you can avoid this attack entirely is by getting right up next to the base of FP. The orbs will circle you, but will never be able to touch you. This is risky though, because more often than not you'll have to contest with the other attacks. The more reliable method is to move with the direction the orbs are spinning, by slide hopping around the arena and saving the dash for when you really need it. Slide hopping directly across the arena may prove to be helpful as well. During this attack, FP can't use any other attacks or summon them, so it's a very good opportunity to lay on some damage thick. At 50% health or below, the number of orbs expelled increases as the number of rows the FP fires increases as well. Harmless rows increase from 1 to 2. Lenient from 1 to 2. Standard increases from 2 to 3. And Violent increases from 2 to 3. The next attack we'll talk about is the Black Hole Summon. This functions identically to the attack used by the Corpse of King Minos in 2.4, where it tracks the player slowly around the arena. It even does the same amount of damage, which is 10 damage and 99 hard damage, leaving the player at 1 health. On Harmless, FP does not use this attack at all. You can easily bait this attack from one side of the arena to the other, just be sure to listen for that humming, buzzing sound it makes. It will not disappear as long as it's out. It will only disappear when it contacts the player or when FP dies. Getting hit by the black hole while still under the effects of a previous black hole will kill the player. The easiest strategy you can do to avoid this is slide hopping. Just be aware of where it is and start moving away from it. Attempting to dash through it will not work. I've tried. Finally, we'll talk about the Divine Light attack. Each pillar will deal 30 damage and will throw the player up into the air. From the time the symbol appears on the ground to when the pillar explodes is about 3 seconds. On Harmless through Standard, FP will summon 2 pillars, while on Violent it will summon 3. At 50% health or less, it will summon an extra pillar, 3 on Harmless through Standard and 4 on Violent. The attack appears closer to the player on higher difficulties. For example, on Harmless, the pillar could appear on the other side of the arena, while on Violent, it will almost always appear directly on top of the player. Moving into a pillar after it first appears will still damage and bounce the player. You can easily avoid a pillar by slide hopping or dashing just outside of its radius, and then when the next symbol appears on the ground, you can simply just walk out of its radius as well. After the attack begins, FP can start using its other attacks almost right away, which is what makes this one so tough to deal with. By itself, it's actually not too bad. There's also a little more information I'd like to go over in regards to these summons. The eyes have 1 HP and the malicious faces have 2. The eye summons have a small beam attack that will deal 15 damage to the player if they manage to land a hit. Malicious summons shoot out a mini malicious beam attack. The beam itself will do 20 damage while the explosion will do 30, totaling up to 50 damage, sometimes 53 if the explosion hits you twice, which can happen if you're caught in the center of it. These beam attacks from both summon types can actually explode the player's core eject, causing a super explosion. You can actually charge back the malicious face beams, though doing this during normal play is very difficult and impractical, but it is really cool. At 50% health or below on all difficulties, the number of summons will increase. Harmless goes from 5 to 6, Lenient goes from 7 to 8, Standard goes from 10 to 12, Violent goes from 8 eyes and 2 faces to 9 eyes and 3 faces. So before we move forward, I want to say this. You've got to conserve your stamina as much as you can. Something that can kill a lot of players is the over-reliance of dashing or dash jumping, and when you finally need to dash to avoid fatal damage, you don't have enough stamina. You should be familiar and comfortable with the other movement mechanics that the game has to offer, especially with slide hopping, as it is used a lot during this fight. But now, let's talk about some general strategies. FP is always idle for a few seconds at the start of the fight, and this is a good opportunity to put some damage into it. However, if you've watched the previous video in this guide series, you'll know that damaging FP too much will cause it to heal, so be ready to take out those summons as soon as they spawn in. As I also covered in the last video, some of the best ways to take out these summons are with the default marksman split shots, carefully picking them off with the revolvers, or my personal favorite method, nuking them as soon as they spawn in by shooting a core eject grenade with the malicious rail cannon. These little guys are a high priority to take out, and they'll heal FP when the timer goes off. They'll also constantly harass you as you fly around the arena. If you're really desperate for the kill, you can whiplash them to you or yourself to them during the heal. Some great ways to deal damage to FP are through pro boosting, shotgun swapping, and the nail guns. All rail cannon variants are very useful for this fight as well, just be sure you can take out the summons if you don't use the nuke method for when they spawn in. If you get right underneath FP, you can easily pull off a rail coin. Even with the 50% damage resistance, this will do a nice heap of damage. No matter what you do, there is a technique that can help you out greatly during this fight, and this is known as quick swapping. I'll quickly cover quick swapping here. If you've seen my video about the shotguns, you'll have some understanding of this. If you swap to a different weapon right after you fire, you can cancel the recoil animation and instantly fire your next weapon. Custom keybinds are a big help, but not everyone is comfortable with them at first. It takes some time to get used to them and develop them. I use custom binds myself, and I'll show you what they are here on the screen in just a moment. The only weapons quick swapping doesn't entirely work with are the slab revolvers after you fire them due to the global cooldown animation, and the rail cannons due to their recharge. If you're having trouble getting speed for slide hopping, one quick way to get you going is to jump, slam, jump, and slam again, but as you hit the ground the second time, tap the slam slide button and quickly jump right away. You can use your whiplash as well to fly to FP, but be aware that you could fly right into one of its attacks if you're not careful. The real key is to practice the mechanics you've learned and to react to each attack FP uses accordingly. They'll come out mostly randomly. All you have to do is look and listen for the tells. If you want to practice your movement skills, the long tunnel in 2.4 is a great place for that. I'll also leave a link to my movement tech video as well if you want a more in-depth look at those different mechanics. But for right now, let's have a look at everything we've covered and see all of this in action. When you kill FP, be very aware that you can still die during its death animation, either from the summons, the black hole, any orbs still spitting, and the pillars of light, so basically anything that can kill you can still kill you. With time, I know you'll be able to clear the flesh prison, but after it falls, your fight still goes on.
Free at last.
I would like to give a special thanks to McLintree, who had put together some of the data I used here on Flesh Prison. Without him, I definitely would have missed some very important information. He also has some data I'll be using for the next guide, so thanks again. I really appreciate the work you've done there. As always, thanks to Locked for the damage and health chart for enemies and bosses, and a huge thanks to everyone who's been supporting me over these last few months. It's been a bit rough, but things are looking a lot better. And I'm sorry if I sounded a little weird in this video. My nose is a little stuffy. My allergies have kicked in pretty bad. Anyways, class is dismissed for now, and I'll see you all in the next lesson.